want to welcome you to the session. It's called BART's on its way. My name is Nguyen. I'm a program officer for the Regional Planning Grant-Making Strategy at the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. I've been paying sales taxes into this thing since I was like 12 years old, I think, or 15 years old, since I bought my first stick of bubble gum. So I'm excited to present this to you today. The way that we're going to be doing this is you're going to, get in your seat, get onto Fremont-bound train, and just think about all the way down geographically. We're going to get off first in South Fremont, Warm Springs, get back on the train, get off at Milpitas, maybe get out, get a Starbucks over at the Great Mall, get back on, and then you're going to end up at Berryessa. I don't know what you would do there because the flea market will be gone. You might be able to get a Blockbuster at the ground floor of the new TOD there, but we'll be hearing more about sort of the problems at Berryessa. I think Brent will explain that, but for now, I'll say it's transit-oriented development. So we're going to start off with Brent Pearse from VTA. He's the Community Outreach Supervisor. And then representing Fremont, we have Natarajan. She's a council member and vice mayor. Is that correct, still vice mayor? Or?
That was last year.
Last year, I'm sorry.
No, last year.
Sorry, this is not updated. This is not updated. I need to start following you on Twitter. We also have Allison Lasser, Executive Director of Congregations Organizing for Renewal, and then Sheldon, a city planner for the city of Milpitas. And then we also have Ratna, Amin, Transportation Policy Director for SPUR. So yeah, let's get started. So we're also recording this. So later on, when we're doing Q&A, please use the microphone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Again, my name is Brent. I work at VTA. I've been there about 7 years. Spend a lot of my time working on the VTA's BART Silicon Valley extension. And so I'd just like to orient us here. We already have one question, which is what does VTA have to do with BART? And just to start with that, in 2000, voters in Santa Clara County voted to bring BART to Silicon Valley. And so VTA and BART have formed a partnership, but VTA is the agency that's actually delivering this extension into Silicon Valley. So we've done all the design, and we're actually building the system, and will be owned by the voters of Santa Clara County, but will be operated by BART. So we're closing this loop here from South Fremont into San Jose, and we're currently right now building the first phase of our 16-mile program, and that's the Berryessa extension. So we're going to be continuing from the future Warm Springs station, which Anu will kind of highlight the area around that station next. They'll be opening in late 2015, and then we're going to be building a 10-mile extension into Milpitas and into San Jose with 2 stations. So just some things to highlight here. We have a federal grant that's funding about half of this extension. It's a $900 million grant. That's a very large agreement that we have with the federal government to build and deliver this system. And we expect to be opening this system for revenue operations in 2017. And we'll be opening both stations at the same time. Cost for the first phase is about $2.3 billion. Our estimated ridership on opening day, 24,000. It's around about 12,000 per station to keep it simple, give or take a few. So let me touch on the stations here. This is really kind of the lead-in, I think, for some of the other presenters, and really the most important part of what this session is about, which is what does BART do in a community when you build a new station, and how do cities and advocates work to plan around them. And so here at Milpitas, our first stop will be at the corner of Montague Expressway and Capitol. This is right next to VTA's existing light rail guideway or light rail station. The Great Mall's to the north of us here with DeVry College. And this is a hub of activity in Milpitas right now. There is truly a lot of development occurring right here in Milpitas. What VTA has planned at this station is we have a transit center, which will be moving from the Great Mall. It's about 20 bus bays. It was talked about in one of the earlier, the GM session, are we going to be accommodating private shuttles? And we are. We're going to actually have space for private shuttles here. We believe that private shuttles complement our service and provide another mode of access for people. We have a 6-story parking facility. It will have about 1,200 spaces, and then a surface parking lot here to the south. This roadway you see here will actually be a City of Milpitas facility. This is an extension of an existing roadway that they have, and it will provide a new way to get into the station. It'll be a really wide boulevard with very wide sidewalks, really good pedestrian access and bicycle access. So this is kind of a rendering of what it will look like. This structure up here on the left, this is our pedestrian overcrossing. It will be able to take you straight from the BART station across Capitol Avenue right into our light rail facility. We'll be able to connect to North San Jose, to all of our high-tech jobs, and to the future 49er Stadium. So that's a really nice amenity. This is our main transfer facility from what will be BART to BTA's existing light rail system. All right, Berryessa Station. Trip time from here to San Francisco, 60 minutes on opening day to Embarcadero Station. From Milpitas.
What city are we at now?
We're now in San Jose. This is the Berryessa neighborhood. It's kind of northeast San Jose, east of downtown. Trip time from Milpitas, I didn't mention, is about 55 minutes to San Francisco. Berryessa is a really large station campus. You'll maybe hear a little bit more about that from some of our other presenters. It's situated between Berryessa Road here. This is looking north, and Mayberry here on the south. We're going to be building a new public right-of-way. This is called Berryessa Station Way, provide access from both roadways. We're also going to be making some really key trail improvements into this station to provide access for our bicyclists. It'll be along Upper Penitencia Creek here. We're working in partnership with the city and with MTC to build that connection. We have another parking garage here, similar capacity, about 1,200 spaces, and a surface parking lot. The station also has a police zone facility, which is really, we feel, really important. BART also requires police facilities typically at the end of their line, and the station is going to serve as a temporary end-of-line station for probably about 8 to 10 years until we can put together our funding for our next phase into downtown San Jose.
Open 24/7?
The police zone facility, correct? Yes.
And is it for San Jose Police or BART Police?
It will actually be a BART police facility. BART has their own police force. The station will also have, I think there's 16-foot sidewalks. They'll be split into 2 parts. So one's a multi-use part for bicyclists, and the other is for pedestrians. So they'll kind of have their own right-of-way actually getting in and out of the station from both streets. All right, continue. Theme for this station, you're going to see a lot of landscaping at the Berryessa Station. The theme that we, our architects and designers and working with the city have selected is the environment. So there's a lot of native-scape, a lot of native plantings in this station, and then some of the nice architecture, canopy over the station itself, kind of works with the environment.
I'm sorry. How much lawn is in this landscape?
If you go back a little bit, you can see we'll have some lawn in the entry here. This is a potential future use for development site right here, and then there is some native-scape and lawn along the parking area, but mainly shrubs and trees. Okay. Cool. Mode access. Our GMs talked a lot about this, and this kind of leads into how our cities plan around our stations. A lot of our ridership is going to be coming from existing transit. You can see in Milpitas, high percentage light rail access because we have light rail access there, about 40% of our ridership. Berryessa is a little different. It's a much more suburban station, very low density around the station currently, and you're going to see a lot more bus traffic and a slight uptick in auto traffic because it's an end of the line. Okay. Some of these numbers still astound me when I look at them. Why are we building this? How many of you have driven down to the South Bay, used 680, 880? It's awful. It's a nightmare. And BART's going to relieve you know, a lot of those trips from those freeways, they're at capacity right now. And we're going to be expecting to, you know, BART has the capacity moving with full trains to move 20,000 people on this 10-mile extension. It's pretty impressive. You look at some of these numbers, the amount of people in San Jose that will, or in Milpitas that will be able to just simply ride their bike within a 12-minute ride to our station, 260,000 people. The amount of people that can walk a half mile to the station is going to provide a lot of access and new mobility for people. And then some of our planning numbers, and I'll let my other partners here get into the details, but some of the growth proposed around these stations is very impressive, especially in Milpitas. And they've really done a good job at focusing their development and using the station as a key piece of how they're going to build their cities. And so you look at some of these resident new units, 7,100 units in Milpitas, a lot of those under construction. I think 4,000 units maybe in construction right now in Milpitas alone. There's a lot of construction just happening outside the actual BART construction right now.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
On that previous slide, you said 15 minutes via public transit for over 1 million people. Is that with existing transit, or is that planned transit?
That's with our existing service that we have now. So what's interesting?
Where are those people living? I mean, like, which station is supporting?
So that's for the whole 10-mile extension. So that's Milpitas, Santa Clara, Sunnyvale. That could be, you know, that's a large part of the South County. So that's. You can skip this one. Just to show you guys some of the construction that's currently going on right now. This is in Fremont. We're widening Mission Boulevard. This is a key corridor. You're probably asking, why are you doing this? But this is a good example of partnerships that we form with other public agencies. When agencies like VTA come in and build infrastructure, we work with Caltrans, we work with Fremont. This is our grade separation at Cato. Anu was at the groundbreaking last April. She got to cut the ribbon. BART's a grade, what we call a grade separated facility. So it's going to run on a bridge here over Cato Road. It's completely separate from any other facility. That's what makes BART so appealing. That's what makes it so fast. It runs in its own right-of-way. So this was a project that we just completed to lower this road underneath the future system.
And you made the crossover at the top there so wide because of why? Because I see the BART tracks and the railroad tracks. I don't understand the rest of it.
So this is BART's being built in an existing railroad corridor. So Union Pacific Railroad is actually going to continue to operate. So we had to, you know, part of our agreement with them is to keep them operating alongside BART. So we built a new bridge for them. We built a third bridge for maintenance of both systems, and then this future bridge for the additional BART tracks that will be constructed. Okay, it's a wide corridor. It's about 120 feet right there. Let's move forward, Bubay. Here, go back one. Milpitas Station. Some of the major activities occurring right now. We're excavating the station right now. You can see the excavation. Milpitas Station's a below-ground station, so we have to dig down about 30 feet to prepare for all those facilities. You can see our existing Montague Light Rail Station here, and one day there'll be the pedestrian overcrossing that will connect the two. Next slide. And then our Berryessa Station. So this is an aerial station. It's aerial because it's very close to two roadways, so we opted to build an aerial structure over both those roadways. And you can see here in the background the flea market. This is a potential, all those development numbers, all those units, a lot of those around the Berryessa Station are going to be built here. This is a 150-acre parcel, and it's owned by one family. And it's one of two of the largest remaining development sites left in San Jose. So there's a lot of plans for this site for increased densities. And as Vubang mentioned, you know, the flea market's there now, but it may not be there, you know, in 5 years as the Bum family decides to move forward with development plans. It might be there, yeah. We don't know.
What would be there?
We'll be talking about that.
Yeah, SPUR's going to talk about that probably a little bit more. This is in San Jose's general plan, this site around the BART station is what they would call an urban village. So you're going to see a lot of new housing, a lot of new retail and commercial. A true, fully built out, self-sustaining community. And that's it. So if you want to follow us on Facebook or Twitter, feel free to sign up. We even have our social media administrator here in the background, that's Cody in the back. So you can talk to him if you want to learn how to follow us and get more information as well. Okay, I'll hand it over.
So now you're in South Fremont, which is the southernmost city in Alameda County as BART heads down to Milpitas and on to San Jose. What I'm going to show you are images and some of the important features of our community plan that we have not adopted yet, but are in the process of reviewing and looking at. So the City Council looked at it for the first time just last Tuesday. So you're seeing something that's just really new. Again, the thing I want to stress is starting point for conversation, it's not approved. And so I'll talk about all the things we've done, and over the next 10 minutes, Allison will talk about all the things we haven't done yet. So again, in terms of where we are, we'd like to see this project go out to the community, reviewed, approved by probably July or August, and then start the tough job of implementing it. So let me just, in the next 9 minutes, walk you through it. About 3 years ago, there were two things that happened that were significant to Fremont. One was NUMMI, which made cars here, made several 100,000 cars shut down and laid off a lot of people, both at NUMMI and all the supply chain, impacting over 25,000 jobs in the region and in California. And then BART at that time also got fully funded and started construction on its expansion down to Warm Springs. So the station, which has been a Warm Springs station for the last 30 years, now was beginning to become a reality. And so people were recognizing that something was really going to happen there. We got funding from the federal government to take a look at what we would do around the land because BART was going there. And while we were doing that, in the process of doing it, although we can't take any credit for it, Tesla decided to buy the NUMMI property, 5 million square feet of building, and over 200 acres of land right adjacent to what would be the future BART station. Next. And one more slide. And while we were doing all of this, we also took a look at what the south end of Fremont was becoming. There was a lot of advanced manufacturing that was moving into Fremont. And we took a look at what we had there, and we had the makings of what everybody's calling an innovation district. Advanced manufacturing, clean tech businesses, the kinds of facilities that you need and the supply chain that you need for manufacturing facilities like Tesla, but a lot of other solar manufacturers, although Solyndra was something that we had and it disappeared. In its place, we've had over 32 green businesses and manufacturing that moved here. And so it had happened incrementally, and so we took a look at it and said, this is what we need to become, a hub for advanced manufacturing, not just in Fremont, but for the region itself.
And that yellow, that red rectangle, what is it?
So that whole thing is the factory that makes the Tesla cars. Yes. So if you take a look at this site bounded by the yellow lines, it's 850 acres of almost vacant or underdeveloped land, and in ownerships of really large chunks of land. So you had BART with 32 acres of land. You had another property right across from BART, which was 60 acres. Union Pacific swooped in and picked up 160 acres and wanted to put a rail yard, but we went to Omaha and talked to them about what they were sitting on in terms of the potential, the regional impact of what could be developed here. And so they put that back on the market, and we have developers that are working with us. And we also got the ULI, the Urban Land Institute, to come and take a look at this area and say, how big can we dream? What can really happen here? Click. Yeah. So if you take a look at the size, I mean, just to give you a sense of the magnitude, it's 2.5 times Mission Bay in San Francisco, and 3 times Moffett Field, just to get you a sense of the space that we are looking at. Next. And also taking a look at the BART line itself, from Oakland all the way down to Berryessa, we took a look at the land uses around BART, and it's all predominantly residential. And BART is also looking at ridership in the reverse direction, so we took a look at where we were located in Fremont, the kind of land that we had, the district that was located in, and it seemed to make sense after Oakland that we should be looking at an employment-based TOD. So you know now what a TOD is, right? So this is not a TOD, this is an ETOD. So we were looking at an employment-based transit-oriented development, and with that comes a whole host of issues that we will explore as we move forward. Again, so we looked at options around there. It went all the way from just having manufacturing to a mixed use, which included manufacturing, R&D, office development, residential, in the whole gamut. And so we landed with this as just a framework for where we wanted to go, and some of the things that we needed to be looking at in terms of infrastructure development and making use of the regional investment in BART. So this is the starting of our community plan, which again, the draft just got released. And these are some of the principles that we looked at in terms of what needed to be addressed. Community quality of life, making the connections, the transit connections that we don't have at this point, job retention and creation, and making this a more urban place in Fremont, and urban within the suburban context, and really trying to define what that meant. Next slide. So this became for us a vision, and Tesla became a metaphor for what we wanted to see here. So we acknowledge that we are the heart of suburban land. It wasn't going to change. 85% of our housing stock is single-family residential, each with 2 cars. We were not going to change that dramatically, but we had the opportunity to introduce something a little more urban in other areas that was strategically located near the BART station. So if we were going to use cars, we were going to use cool green cars and make sure that it was 21st century cutting edge, and taking a look at innovative principles, both in the way we were doing things in terms of the infrastructure and financing of it, and in the planning itself. Again, focused growth to take advantage of BART, but with that comes the next layering of how do we get people to BART, because we have a spine that takes people in and out of Fremont, but we don't have a network of transit options to get people to the BART station without having to drive. A diversity of uses. One of the things we wanted to get away from was this Crayola zoning of just having one kind of use, and to say we want to have a mix of uses, and what does that mean? How do we work the conflicts out? But predominantly a place for people where you had public spaces and the public realm, which was really conducive for people to have to connect and be a community. Some of the, again, these are images, a lot of aspirational goals here, but one of the things that we did want to do was to connect to BART using an iconic pedestrian bridge, is to get people to the BART station and say, we need to have a there. This is a land with nothing there for 850 acres. So how do we start this? BART has a really well-designed station, but the 32 acres currently is going to be surrounded by a sea of parking. It's not going to transform and change for several years. So in the time that we still have that sea of parking, how do we anchor that? How do we make it a place? And how do we have a marker that says you have arrived in Warm Springs? Again, some of the renderings showing some of the public spaces that we wanted, people having sidewalks, making sure as you walk, this is what we call the innovation way, so people are really spilling into the public spaces, and for us to take a look at what a true urban place looks like. So this gives you a sense of the overall land use and planning areas, and the way we approached this was to say we have no clue what's going to happen over the next 20 years. I mean, if you're talking about being innovative and flexible, don't know, 5 years from now, we'll look back and say, oh my God, this has changed so dramatically, and we can't predict what's going to happen in the next 20 years. And so what we said was, let's have some basic ideas in 1 minute. Okay. Principles of good urbanism and what that means. And the kinds of mix of uses, again, using BART as that catalyst and that central point, and see what makes sense. Because if you have industrial R&D, I mean, that's going to not be the right fit to have high-density residential right adjacent to it, or a school. So we just got 4 mixes of uses, and we've got 10 different planning areas. And if you go to the next slide, they allow for different uses in a flexible fashion, but really gives you the sense of what goes where as a framework. So you've got the different kinds of land uses, and the intent is to say Mix A would have the more industrial advanced manufacturing, all the way to Mix D, which is closest to BART and has the highest intensity of development. This is, again, just an analysis to say how much can you accommodate in 850 acres and what would you do? And this is not going high density, more taking a look at traditional patterns of development, urban development in a suburban context, the 4 stories over podium parking, and what could you get? And again, we get to about 20,000 jobs easily, and about the 4,000 units of housing. So projected targets, just to give you a sense of where we are, the minimum amount of dwelling units that we hope to get is 2,700, because we want to make sure that there is a sense of community, and it's not just these projects with 150 to 200 units of housing that are looking inward. More images of what it could look like. Next. So just a couple minutes on this slide. So you see what we have now and what we'd like to transform it to. And we know there's going to be several challenges to getting there. Transitioning from that suburban environment to the more urban environment, the growing pains that we need to face in doing that. But we want to be in an inclusive community. How do you make that happen? But almost the first step is, how do you get that infrastructure in place? Post-redevelopment, where is the money coming from? So we're exploring things like the infrastructure finance IFDs, infrastructure finance districts, working with the legislators to make sure that that is something that works for us. But as we all know, implementation of a long-term plan for 20 years needs the political will, and needs a really bold plan. So you hang on to the basic premise and the vision and allow for the market to change and be flexible as it comes forward. Shifting from business as usual, we had to think long and hard about what we wanted there. And even today, there's going to be pushback in Fremont at the council level about not losing a single parking space. Like, all this is great, this is fine. I want a pedestrian-friendly place, but I do not want to lose one single parking space. So just that inherent conflict is something that we need to work through. Branding and go back. Branding and storytelling. Fremont has been known as a very suburban community. So how do we pitch this and say we have an innovation district? We want the younger population to move here. What is it here that's going to make it cool for them to move to Fremont? Over the long term, which group of people are going to be the vision keepers? It's not going to be the political community, because they come and go, but who's going to keep that vision alive moving forward? We talked about the transition and growing pains, but for something like this to truly work, yes, we've got BART after 30 years, but that's not enough. We need that next network of transit options. Where do we get the funding to make that happen? And what is urbanism in a suburban community? I mean, some of the things that we struggle with is just that whole communication. As an architect and urban planner, I get really excited about an urban planning study, but when we communicate that with the public and we talk in FARs and densities, we've lost them. They have a different picture of what it is that there is. So I think it's important for us to tell the story in a different way, to paint the vision, to be inclusive in getting the community excited about that vision. But really, even simple things like saying, not talking about densities as much as housing prototypes, and getting people to understand what it is that we have here. And then finally, I mean, we keep talking about this as being an innovative district, and I really like for us to step out and be innovative in the way we plan things too. I mean, in spite of everything that we've done that's creative and uplifting here, what accompanies this document is an EIR, which comes out and tells us we have LOSF at 6 different intersections, and we have unavoidable significant impacts of traffic. And so that's what we have, and that's what people are going to use to fight us with something like this. And I know Allison's going to talk about a few additional things. I'm happy to answer questions, but this is simply to give you a flavor of what it is we're doing in Fremont. It's absolutely exciting and comes with huge challenges too. Thank you.
All right, so in addition to what Anu just said, I also want to talk about the same development from a different perspective. So we're community organizers. My name is Allison Lasser. I'm the executive director at CORE, Congregations Organizing for Renewal, and we are an affiliate of the PICO National Network. So I don't know who all is in the audience. Is somebody here not familiar with community organizing?
Congregational sounds like a church.
That's right. So it's faith-based community organizing.
Oh.
So does everyone know what community organizing is? Okay. So our job is to we're trying to kind of be the prophetic voice for things. So our job is to kind of push the envelope and to bring as many community members together and help create the political will for things that aren't receiving enough attention, especially to benefit those who are not currently benefiting from our current development system. Right, and we having tremendous inequality, so that's kind of the perspective that we're coming from to this development. So I want to round out what Anu said, hopefully. In addition to everything that she said, we agree and we support all of her efforts, no question, and the city's efforts. So next slide. So Fremont has a problem, right? And Anu mentioned many of these issues. And I think Brent also mentioned it, but the Fremont to the South Bay corridor is the second most impacted commute market in the Bay Area. Fremont residents also travel further to their work sites than the state average, so it's about 30 minutes. The other thing is that, Fremont is very well educated, but Fremont also loses its talent. And we have people who are coming up in the city, getting great education, and then leaving. And we have the impact to some of our member congregations is that they're closing their doors. They don't have enough young families that are coming in and kind of re-energizing the community and filling the spots of folks who are retiring, who are leaving, and who used to provide a lot of energy for their congregations, right? So we're hearing this on a regular basis. We're hearing, when I ask the congregations why, what's going on, they say, well, come on, Fremont can't compete with, people want to live in Palo Alto, they want to live in San Francisco, nobody wants to come here and have a family in Fremont. So that's a major challenge. With that, obviously, we're saying that, yes, with this TOD, we obviously see it too as a huge opportunity. In a recent article in The Atlantic, it says that it's titled, What Cities Really Need to Attract Entrepreneurs, according to entrepreneurs. So what do you think the #1 thing is that entrepreneurs are looking for?
Good schools?
No.
Good talent.
Good talent, that's exactly right. So second to good talent, talented workers, is the quality of life that educated and ambitious people come to expect, right? So given that we're talking about a TOD that is 20 years, 30 years off to its completion state, we're hoping that the city is able to kind of think longer term and think about, in order to reduce the suburban sprawl, really think about what is it that we can do today to help in the next few generations to really stay in Fremont and create a different type of community in Fremont. And so when we went out and we asked, you can go to the next slide, when we went out and asked people what is it that they want to see in this TOD, by and large, the responses were that they want to see job training, they want to see affordable housing, and they want to see, what's the other thing that they want to see? They want to see something else that'll come to me in a minute. So for Fremont, so we said, okay, well, let's look at this job situation. So there's many things that we could talk about right now, but I guess what has been most noteworthy in this process of talking with residents, of surveying residents, we do a lot of one-on-one conversations to find out how are people needing job training, what does that look like, what are the gaps, what is their relationship to employment in Fremont or to other areas of the Bay Area where they have to travel to. So this is what we learn is that people would love to stay in Fremont if they can. The issue is that when we go out and do a lot of research on this, there's a bunch of people, if you think about job training and who's responsible for it, there is the WIBs, there's the Workforce Investment Boards, right? There's community colleges. There tends to be social service agencies that provide kind of some basic skills maybe, or there's agencies that also help to transition workers from once there's layoffs, like what in the NUMMI plant, people come together around big projects like that. But there's no specific city role in job training. So that's what we've learned. And the city has kind of said, look, we don't do job training. That's somebody else's responsibility. So what we're trying to say is, look, if we have 20 to 30 years to plan for this, let's talk to employers, find out what is it that they need. Let's create the job training that we need in Fremont so that people who are not getting six figures and are not on that pathway, that they can actually get high-paying jobs in Fremont and stay in Fremont and decrease the suburban sprawl that we have, right? So what we're looking at is we want to make sure that there's community. I'm sorry, the youth center was the third thing that we were hearing. Youth center is needed. So people want to see activities and people want to see life in Fremont on a regular basis. And you have a lot of ethnic communities, like Anu said, we have like 57% of people speak a language other than English in their household, right? So you have mixed generation families, people who are staying in the household probably, but will the next generation also want to stay with that household? I don't know. But people need affordable housing, people need jobs, and they want to stay in Fremont. So so again, what we're talking about here is creating an innovative pathway so that community colleges have job pathways and career pathways to emerging industries. What community colleges are saying is they don't have enough people getting into these pipelines. The other thing that they say is there isn't enough support to actually support disadvantaged, high-risk students from staying in that cohort. So what they need is first of all, they need money for paid internships so that somebody is not waiting 4 or 5 years for job experience. They're actually getting hands-on experience as they're going through education. The other thing that they need is companies need visibility. We need to be able to find ways of showing off companies that are going to invest locally, that are willing to partner with us to create jobs and keep people, allow for people to live in the community that they want to live in, right, and give back to Fremont. The other thing that we're talking about is the public-private partnerships, not just in terms of infrastructure, but also, we need policies that are going to support employers in getting their needs met. So with advanced manufacturing, there's not just one just training program that's going to serve, obviously, all advanced manufacturing. We really need to kind of work together and bring these pieces together so that there is the appropriate training programs for people who are excluded from the job market so that they can actually have a place at the table and get into the career paths that are paying well and that are emerging in Fremont. So this is what we're talking about. I just want to also refer to, this is, when you talk about benefits, you talk about community benefits, this is something that Fremont hasn't seen a whole lot of organized constituencies. This is a suburban place. There's people from a lot of different countries who are a little concerned with dealing heavily with the city and advocacy, right? It's not that comfortable of a thing. So it's going to require a whole lot of power to be built in order to kind of move the city and to be a partner with the city and talking about community benefits and talking about land value recapture, for example. But I want us to just kind of leave with an inspirational note. We're going to continue pushing for this, and hopefully I can come back and let you know how it goes. But I just wanted to lift up this example. Can you advance it again? One more? So this is and I know you're never supposed to do this in a presentation, but I would love if you guys could read this for a second. Or if somebody in the back maybe could read it out loud for us. So this is from the Eastern Neighborhood Plan from San Francisco from 2008. And this was obviously, there's a whole lot of community organizing that happened in San Francisco and strong community organizations on the ground, right? And they were able to work with the city to create this as a policy. So could somebody in the back row read this out loud? Anyone who can see from the back?
I'll read it.
Okay.
The purpose of public benefits incentive zoning is to ensure that any increased development potential resulting from a rezoning of the Mission District helps to develop a diverse, balanced, and healthy neighborhood. Where the rezoning allows an increase in density or buildable square footage, it not only confers greater development potential, but also creates greater land value for property owners and sales or rental value for developers. Increased private value is thereby conferred by a public act, but without gaining advantages for the local community. This program creates a mechanism to capture a portion of this increased land value in the form of public benefits that will mitigate the impact of the additional development rather than allow it to become windfall profit to the landowner. Public benefits may take the form of affordable family and senior housing units above the required inclusionary zoning, community serving space, public accessible open space, and light industrial space where appropriate. For the purpose of this program, rezoning includes increases in height, bulk, building square footage, or density, or major changes in allowed uses.
So how amazing is that, right? To have a city with that vision and with that as a goal. We obviously have a long way to go in Fremont, but I think that this is something that is worth, as advocates, as people who are organizing, this is something that we need to be working with our cities on. We really need to create more of these community benefit incentive zones, so that, you know, this should be standard practice. It's like no matter what development happens, this is, no matter, you know, in the case of Fremont, they're adding tremendous value to this private property by rezoning this land. So you guys saw, you know, how it stands today and what the future depictions look like. That's incredible land value increase for the landowner. So this idea of how can we legislate it, how can we make it so that communities are actually receiving some of that increase in value. So I think this is a challenge for us. And we are concretely, our vision is this job training center. In addition to a local hire that favors, you know, zip codes from disadvantaged backgrounds, we want to see ban the box, which is everyone familiar with ban the box? No. That's a policy that allows for people with criminal backgrounds to be able to have equal opportunity when they go to apply for jobs, and also even apply for housing, for example. The other thing that we're looking for is at least 20% of affordable housing units. So Anu said about 4,000, up to 4,000 units of housing could happen at that site. And we want to see it increase to at least 20% affordable housing. In addition to all of the environmental and better transportation, obviously, because this is going to be a huge transportation problem with this increased density. So, but it's obviously a problem that we want to embrace and work with. So just to say real quick, so this job training center, the idea is that the first phase of construction first phase of jobs is going to be construction, right? So we want to make sure that, similar to the Army base, that there's a job training site where people can get the skills that they need to get into the trades. Yeah, that's number one at the job training site. So it's kind of like a placement center and also a career advice center, career counseling center. The other piece of the job training center that we're looking at is so that people can get into these career pathways. You need like algebra, math, and you need high-level English skills, and you need customer service. You need, relational skills. So that's the other piece of it. I'm out of time. So that's the job center. So thank you.
Sure. Well, what school system are you going to use to train these people or retrain these people?
So the retraining, there's actually career programs through these community colleges.
Which
but
are they in your area?
Oh, like Ohlone has a lot. Ohlone does, Chabot does. Yeah. And there's a lot of money to do that in federal grants to do those types of programs.
Good afternoon. I'm Sheldon. I'm a planner with the City of Milpitas, and today I'm going to talk to you about the implementation of a vision that's embodied by our specific plan. So just give a little context of where we're located in Milpitas. To the north of us is Fremont, and we're surrounded to the east by Santa Clara County unincorporated, and then San Jose is the rest of our border. Next slide, please. So we are really at the crossroads of Silicon Valley and also the gateway, because we have this impressive transportation network. There are three major freeways, 880, 680, 237, along with an expressway at Montague. Then we have existing light rail system with 3 light rail stations, including one that's going to be adjacent to the future BART station. And then, of course, the BART coming down and through the city. So it does provide for, next slide, a lot of opportunities, and that's why we came up with 2 specific plans. So the Midtown specific plan was adopted in 2002, and that was really to renovate sort of our main street in the central part of the city. But another component of that also included 437 acres that would be, in the future, the transit area specific plan.
And
so
it's all the same color.
Well,
sort of different shades of purple, but the one to the south is the transit area. Yes, thank you. Okay, so next slide. So specifically, we'll talk about the areas that are adjacent to the BART station. It does include all of the transit area plan, and then the what would be adjacent to it is the parts of the Midtown, which is just along here. So the Midtown plan was adopted in 2002. The offshoot of that was further planning, the meeting with stakeholders, a lot of that vision that Fremont's done recently, and we adopted our plan in 2008. It was supposed to be a 25-year build-out plan. We actually have about half of it that's already entitled, so they can go out and build tomorrow if they wanted to. So if you go down there today, a lot has really changed. It is, in that area, it was industrial. Some parts of it still are. A lot of it's been raised, and now current construction's happening. We're planning for 7,100 dwelling units, about 200 to 300,000 square feet of commercial. We already have the Great Mall, and that's already 1.2 million square feet. So the emphasis there wasn't to have a whole lot of commercial necessarily, but to have something that people can draw people to, as well as live there. We have a infrastructure program, it's a $240 million infrastructure program. So that's one of the issues with infill. You have to upgrade the utility facilities, along with we're planning for a couple of pedestrian bridges that go over Montague. One is planned from the BART station across Montague, and that gets people easier to Great Mall.
Can you indicate where we're talking?
Yes, right here is the BART station, and then there would be a future pedestrian bridge here, and then people easily get to the Great Mall Great Mall. And also parks. Land is very expensive, so that's why we have a $240 million, and we have to pay for that, and therefore developers are borning that fee. It's presently at $30,000 a unit, and there's also a square footage amount. The concentric circles are areas that are within walking distance of the light rail and BART. It's about a third of a mile, but some of us, of course, can walk easily more than that. Next slide. So I want to just briefly talk about some of the densities. we plan for very high and also minimum. So for instance, our very high at the top, 41 dwelling units per acre to 75. It's a very high density for the area. And then as low as 21 to 40. So the 41 to 75, we plan for those to be along the transportation corridors, such as Great Mall and Montague, as well as adjacent to light rail stations and BART. And then the lower ones, the 21 to 40, are those that are not within those circles, those kind of walkable distances. And then we also have some intensity for our general commercial and industrial, just to have a mixture of uses. So, if we were to meet the densities of the plan, we have probably about 31 dwelling units per acre spread out over the whole site. If we do the maximum amount, you get about 53 dwelling units per acre. So we're actually seeing a good mixture of that, and I'll go over that just a little bit. Next slide, please. So this kind of shows a little bit of the program of what we have. We've got some parks here in a dark green, and these are very large areas. This is about 12 acres. This could be also a site of a future school, and we're partnering with the school district on that. And then as well as there's some areas that are outside of the specific plan that are under development. That also helps with the density in the area. We have about 3,000 dwelling units that have been entitled to date. And we'll also have some mixed use significantly in this area here. There's no grocery store that's in this area, but with this project, and I'll talk about it a little briefly, there's some mixed use in a grocery store that would be coming to that area. Next slide, please. So again, these are just kind of some areas that are entitled or already existing. And the next slide, please. So this is our first development, just to go over, and this is actually located just outside of the transit area specific plan, but adjacent to the light rail station that's there in the Great Mall. So these are actually apartments, and there is some affordable units here, and you're looking at 74 dwelling units per acre. So that's pretty intense, and you have to so you can see what it looks like there is kind of a nice building, Mediterranean type of building. This is presently under construction, so if you go down to that area, you can see they're building this. Next slide. This is the big one they're talking about. It's about 23 acres, 50 dwelling units per acre, 1,200 dwelling units. It's a huge mixed-use project, and you can see where this is a mixed use where you'd have the future grocery store.
Looks like they're built right up to the sidewalk.
Yeah, it's about probably 15-foot sidewalk, so you're probably about 30, 40 feet with landscaping and sidewalk there. The idea is to have a bigger sidewalk adjacent to commercial to have that walkability. Okay, next slide. Citation is located here. It's an apartment building. It's market rate. It's 45 dwelling units per acre. It's just down the street from the BART station. Next slide. And this is the Mediterranean look of it. Milpitas station is adjacent to it. Just happens to have the same name as the BART station, but it has a mixture of single family and townhouses. It is a lower amount of density. The plan does have flexibility where developers can average density amongst other properties. So overall, we're going to get that 7,100 dwelling units. Just kind of where it will be. It depends on some of the projects that we see. Next slide. So Lion Montague is across. This is right at the intersection of Great Mall and Montague. It's across from the BART station. So it's about 60 dwelling units per acre. Very kind of modernistic looking building. We wanted to see that. We wanted to not see all Mediterranean. We wanted to see things that would complement as well as the BART station, because the BART station does look very, very futuristic in a way. Next slide. So we do have towers that are proposed. This one, though, we think it's going to fall through because it doesn't have the financing. But this one would have had some affordability to it as well. 12 stories. And this is a project that's located outside of those kind of walking areas adjacent to the station. This is more your 3-story townhouse, 21 dwelling units per acre or so. This is one that's proposed right now, being reviewed. This is directly across from the BART station. It's a mixed use, has a little bit of teaser commercial at the corner there, Piper Drive. It's about 60 units per acre. Again, there'll be a pedestrian bridge that goes across there that connects the project site with the BART station. And they're looking at kind of a more contemporary, this is probably an older picture of what we're looking at. Next slide. So in conclusion, there's a lot of potential for affordability. The city doesn't have any requirements for affordability, but we do, when developers do come, we're open to negotiations with them. We have an upcoming housing element, and we're looking at creating more incentives to have more affordable housing because of the loss of RDA, redevelopment. Some of the challenges is implementation of infill development. You have a perfect plan, but when you try to build it, realize that you want to try to save those trees, but you can't because some infrastructure is in the way and you have to get rid of it. So there's a lot of planning that occurs kind of after the fact. Things don't necessarily happen as easily as they do in the plan. Some of the market that we're saying right now is that density should be lower. So we're trying to fight the developers and stick with our plans to keep the high density. We're being so far pretty successful with that. And then funding the infrastructure program with the loss of RDA and potentially lower densities is challenging. That's where you either have to take things out of the infrastructure program or you have to raise your fees. So there's a certain point where, the tipping point where developers won't go into a place because it's too high. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
So the train keeps going to Berryessa, which will be the first station in San Jose. My name's Ratna, Amin. I'm SPUR's Transportation Policy Director. And SPUR, for those of you who don't know, is a member-supported nonprofit that promotes good planning and good government. We've had an office in San Francisco for decades and recently opened one in San Jose about 2 years ago. And we work across a lot of program areas, and we decided that we wanted to kind of get involved, understand, weigh in on the Berryessa site from a lot of perspectives, from a transportation, urban design perspective, and an economic development perspective. So first I'm going to give you a little bit of overview of Berryessa BART. I know Brent already gave you some, an overview of what is planned for the whole area around that BART station, and then just throw out some ideas of what could be in that station area. So I think Brent covered this, but the end of that red line is Berryessa, and then the plan is for it to arc around through downtown San Jose and up to Santa Clara. At least that's what's been voted on in Santa Clara County. And Berryessa has been referred to here and generally as end of the line, but we also want to think about it as the beginning of the San Jose part of the line and its connection to San Jose. Sorry, this is hard to read. This is sort of just a zoom in on the San Jose section of the BART line. And you can kind of see the light rail cutting through there and the squiggly line across the top. That's the light rail. And so Berryessa over there on the right, that bottom dot, and then the next dot's Alum Rock. Oh, I have the pointer. That's right. Sorry. There's Berryessa. It's Milpitas, where we just talked about. Alum Rock, a planned station, downtown, Diridon, and then Santa Clara. So Berryessa is most proximate, actually, to the San Jose stations. What this diagram shows you is a couple of radii around the Berryessa station. This is a half-mile radius, a 10-minute walk approximately. 1 mile radius, about 20-minute walk. And then this is a 2-mile radius, which is probably not walkable. At that point, you need some kind of transit or car to get to Berryessa. There's just too many of these, aren't there? It's a can I dim the lights a little without?
Yeah, they're right behind you. Right behind you.
That doesn't help a lot, but what this would show you is some of what's around there right now. And this is all housing. This kind of fuzzy looking stuff here is housing. And then this is housing that's already built. It's already there. This is housing. And then a lot of what's left is industrial. The BART's being built on Union Pacific right-of-way. So that was an industrial supporting railroad. And so a lot of the land use in that corridor is industrial, and it's from that time. And I think what we're talking about now, and what everyone's talking about, is how do you transition from other land uses to what's appropriate around BART. And BART's about moving people only people for now. We don't move things on BART, we just move people. And so how do you get people to that BART station?
How old is the housing around that area?
I think it ranges. Some was very, I don't know, Brent, do you know?
It was built in the early 70s.
70s,
Yeah, but some quite recently, is that right?
Yeah, there is
Yeah.
some new 3- to 4-story single-family homes within the last decade.
Okay. So here's some pictures of what's there today. These are more recently built homes, very close to the station area. This is BTA's construction going on right now, actually, to prepare the site. Go ahead. This is on Mayberry near King Road. This is nearby. It's self-storage. Self-storage is one of these things you see people build where they think something's going to change in the future. It's a temporary land use, and it's not people-oriented. It's truck-oriented. I don't know what's pictured here. Maybe exactly, but again, this is very close to the BART station. So another. This is actually Schnitzer steel. Sorry, let me find my. Just want to get it right. Okay, this is Therma, which is a mechanical contracting company nearby. This one shows you the old Union Pacific Railroad tracks. This is Schnitzer Steel on Berryessa and Commercial. So again, not a BART-oriented land use, but also not likely to change in the short term either. Chevron Oil Storage Facility. And then what this shows you is what we think actually might be an interesting opportunity near the BART station, which is the flea market. And earlier, Brent talked about how the flea market is there, but it's not in the plans for the future. And so when SPUR came in to look at this station area, we kind of, I think at first went along with the assumption that the flea market will be relocated. However, the city has not, to our knowledge, found a new site for the flea market. The flea market is, go ahead, Bhuvain.
Where is the train station?
Oh,
BART station.
The future BART station, I'll show you some more specific, more detailed pictures in a minute, is right here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so the flea market, I'm sure many of you are more familiar with me than this, who maybe grew up here. It's 120 acres. A lot of that is parking. About 80 acres of parking, 40 acres of market. 4 million visitors a year. I believe 80,000 on some weekends. And just for comparison, that's about a professional football game in some stadiums. It's several times the Sharks arena. And that's every single weekend. It's on a special occasion. 6,000 vendors, and then we have 500 employees on the weekend. So, go ahead. These are some more pictures about what's planned for the future of this site. And it's important to acknowledge that nobody controls all this land. VTA controls a little bit near the station area, and I'll show you a close-up of that. But most of these other pieces of land around the station are privately held. And for those of you who heard Mike Scanlon speak earlier, it's really difficult in our country compared to some other countries that transit agencies don't have any control over land. And generally government doesn't have the control over the land. So we put in millions or billions of dollars in this case into building this BART station, but then we really can't control very well what goes on the land around it. I think some of the other people here have alluded to that. You can have these great plans, but you don't have control over what actually happens. And I think that's a real challenge that we all face. So like I said, VTA holds this, and here's the flea market site, and this site, and they're privately held, but they actually are kind of where the biggest opportunity is near this BART station. A little close up, this is the station, oh sorry, right here. This is flea market, and this is parking, and this is parking. So this is, if you go back, when people talk about this, there's kind of like the VTA station side of the station, and then there's the flea market side of the station. And one of the things we are trying to also figure out is, can these not be two really distinct things? Because that's not what communities are like. This is, I think, Brent, you showed this, right? This is what the station plan is for Berryessa.
The plaza, it's like the
plaza, the entryway. It's lovely, pedestrians, cyclists. And then the next slide shows you, when you zoom out a little bit, what happens. And there's a 1,200 car parking garage planned, probably to be constructed pretty soon. These are houses that are, these ones are already there, actually, right? I think some of these. So some constraints, but we also want to say, what's the opportunity here? Parking garages are really, they're not an ideal thing to have in your community and near such a special thing as a BART station. Now, this is there because it's expected to be the end of the line, and people need to drive to the station until they can walk there and bike there and get there by other means. Can you, excellent. Sorry, it looks like I keep showing you the same thing over and over again, but I'm really not. This is the overall plan for the area, and these are some of the roadways that will come in when the site of the station is developed to break it up a little bit. And this is the conceptual plan for the flea market side of the BART station, and these are all different types of housing, some that are higher density than others, and there's the creek right here and some bridges across it. Keep going. And this is a conceptual drawing of what it would look like. Now, and this was done by Calthorpe and Associates, who you may have heard of. The landowners are not obligated to build this much housing, though. It's the concept, but it's actually not a requirement. And we think it would be really a loss to not make the most of these sites around the BART station. Yeah. So the question we're looking at now is this an opportunity to rethink the traditional housing mixed-use TOD? And I know TOD is jargon. Some of you have heard it a lot today. But we want to introduce a new term called TOM, which is the transit-oriented market. You don't have to use it, but it does happen. I think it sounds nice. Huh? You can keep going. So I'll try and be quick here. Why do you want to rethink the current proposal? And these things have been planned for so long, 10, 15, 20 years. You don't want to rethink it, but it's almost been so long it's worth rethinking from our perspective. Even BART has really changed their thinking around what goes in the station area and how people should get there and how much parking should be there in that time frame. So the flea market's an economic driver for thousands of households. The flea market's a unique asset for the South Bay that could continue to draw many people to the station area. It's this great thing already there. It's people already there next to the BART station. And we also have learned that jobs and shopping on transit will yield more transit trips than housing alone. Another thing to think about is, how do we get riders all day long in both directions and across all days of the week? Because that's actually going to make BART more financially sustainable, in addition to being a better experience for people. So we're actually going to be publishing our thoughts on the station area later this spring. So SPUR.org, if you want to sign up and stay tuned, we'll have something to show you. And just real quick, these are some pictures of other TOMs, transit-oriented markets, in other places. This is in London at Brixton Village. This is, does anyone know? Let me check here. I don't know where that is.
The flea market.
Oh, this is the flea market, sorry. There you go. So that's our local TOM. Okay, thank you.
So we have a few minutes for questions.
Huh? You like TOM?
So currently,
ETOD.
the only accepted way to get to and from the flea market is by car. And do you think that it would actually be practical as well as acceptable for people, especially if they're interested in buying large stuff to use BART to get to and from there?
I would agree if you're buying large stuff, it would not make sense to take transit. I think, well, two things. One, there's probably, and this is just an exploration. I think we need to learn more about whether it makes sense. But I think there will be a certain number of patrons for whom transit will be appropriate, and we can encourage it. The other thing we want to see is a real mix of uses. So it's not just people going to and from the flea market to buy things. And we didn't talk about it, but what are the other things that could be in that neighborhood? And many of them are already planned, just we want to see them happen.
Besides some of the parking lots?
Yeah, we're not a big fan of parking lots because it's...
No, neither am I. I'm just having the cars there.
Yeah, I think when you see our conceptual plan, we won't have surface parking lots. We know that they're actually a good way to hold on to land until we figure out the best thing to put there.
And just about the market, in my previous position, we sponsored a report about existing shopping in that area. And it's not a flea market you go to buy tables or chairs, even though they do sell it there. Because of eBay and Craigslist over the years, where you actually see there are people going there for food and services and just general supplies. So just T-shirts, socks, pineapples, oranges. It's really basic stuff that you would. And in the area, you know, there's not that type of food access at that price level. So you'll see people just doing general grocery shopping.
Just to note, actually BTA does provide bus service to the market on weekends, and it's actually one of our most highest ridership routes.
Is that a shuttle?
It's a service that connects you primarily from light rail on the First Street corridor in San Jose, and it's basically a direct connection to the flea market on weekends, Route 12.
My question's to Sheldon and I guess to Ratna about when you're planning housing, for example, in Milpitas, but the BART station is not yet there and open. I'm curious what you're doing about the timing and parking. How do you build for what will in the future be transit use, but knowing in the interim that people are going to be relying more on cars? How do you balance that?
Right. So that is, a lot of it's a market. The developers know this going in, and when they're constructing these, and the parking isn't necessarily 2 parking spaces per unit, it's a little less than that. It's just, buyers go in with their eyes wide open on that, and that's something that they just have to acknowledge. We've heard from some of the builders that, yeah, there's some rumblings amongst the homeowners, but that's just it. That's just a fact that BART's going to come, and this is the future.
So are there alternative parking areas to support the overflow that might be there now, knowing that in the future there won't be?
No, there's nothing like that. I mean, it's on site. It's very limited street parking.
So you basically reduce the parking to what you hope it will be in the future?
That's correct, yes.
So one of the things that we are looking at in Fremont is, again, knowing that there's going to be this growing pains and transition, is to look at unbundling parking requirements, to say, let's just have a centralized surface parking lot, which will transition to something else later. And also, the other thing that we're looking at doing is to say, especially right around the BART station, is to do maximum parking allowed. Because over and over again, even if we reduce the parking, I'm sure in Milpitas too, the developers want to do their 2-car parking spaces per unit, whether it's a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. And to get away from that, we've said, okay, each one can have one parking space, but the other space needs to be unbundled and sold separately. And it would also be part of that shared pool of parking.
Rob?
Well, it's actually kind of a combination thing, I guess. There was an article in the newspaper a few weeks ago about the worst traffic complaints in the entire Bay Area, and it's the lack of parking at BART stations. So I'm imagining that's going to be happening at Milpitas and the Berryessa BART station. Particularly since somebody said, oh, it's the end of the line, we need parking there, and yet it's only got the 1,200 spaces. That
temporary end of the line.
So I guess and we've already got level F service, there on Montague Expressway. So we're faced with some serious car congestion problems in that area. One of the things that the city manager in Milpitas has suggested is the possibility of a circulator in that area that would actually make a connection between the BART station and the Great Mall, for example, because the crossing that's currently being built is on the wrong side of the railroad tracks from the Great Mall. So even though you can get across Montague, which is one of the barriers in that area, you can't get across the railroad tracks to the Great Mall. And if you brought up the photos, you'd be able to see that. So the idea of having a circulator that would, go from the BART station to the Great Mall, and then a number of other places that are also cut off from the BART station by barriers. We've got another railroad that keeps a section of town that's less than a mile from the BART station. They can't get across those without going way down this way and back around. There's the school site that was discussed. Again, anybody trying to get to that school site from the BART or from the housing around that school site over to the BART is dealing with the Montague crossing there. So we're going to need some kind of a crossing there, and it's in the long-term plans, but it's going to be like $9 million. So again, I keep getting back to this idea that the city manager came up with, which is this kind of a circulator using PRT technology. There would be maybe a 2-mile loop, which means it would cost in the neighborhood of about $30 million. But it would provide a crossing of all these different barriers and a connection from all these different areas and target spots, the destination spots, to the BART station and the transit hub. Are they thinking of anything like that down in the Berryessa area?
Not that I know of, no. I mean, the other transit infrastructure that's being looked at for the Berryessa station is express bus service, to provide access for people in the interim before the second phase of BART is constructed. We'll be running almost like a BRT-like express service to downtown San Jose and most likely to the airport as well. So that will provide kind of a direct stream of people, of bus for people leaving about every 5 minutes to get them to kind of those key destinations.
As long as they're near that particular corridor.
Correct.
So,
one quick point on that, and don't call me crazy, but in our planning horizon, this 10, 20, 30 plus year planning horizon, I'm pretty sure that vehicle technology is going to change so much that the role of parking is going to change drastically as people don't own their cars as much, as robo-taxis already exist in some small places, and they're not so different from personal rapid transit models of years past. So I think we need to keep in mind that actually a dramatic transformations coming on this planning horizon to the role of cars in places like this.
And just to comment too on the parking, I mean, we get a lot of questions about parking, especially at our Berryessa station, and it really is a big deal because as an agency we have to plan for 30 years of growth, but it's a fine line because we have to plan for what's really going to be needed opening day versus the future. And so, you will see at both of our stations, we do have at-grade surface level parking, which could potentially change as a land use in the future if, how the station is built out. If patterns change, people start to get rid of their cars, those surface level lots, that grass area that was referenced earlier, those could be infilled and developed. And so, we originally had a much larger garage at Berryessa and actually scaled it down. And it's now, we're looking kind of more at a phased approach where if in the future we need more capacity, we could build it, but it's not a necessary.
How do you say that?
So we actually have 5 minutes until the next session. Can we? Sure. Go ahead. We have one. Is it a yes or no question, or is it a quick one? All right, go ahead.
You could answer quickly or not, I guess. I just wanted to ask for kind of more perspectives on kind of how you get affordable housing into these places. I think we heard a lot from Allison. on that, but you know, like, do you think about, and there was a question in the earlier session with the transit agency, like, would they be interested in some kind of policy that would include, you know, some percent of housing near these stations or on their land to be affordable? Is there anything like that that you're thinking about with the land that VTA owns, or kind of just generally to include in stationary plans or in follow-ups to those plans?
I think a lot of the cities, several cities have inclusionary zoning, which will need to be incorporated in any of the site area plans too. But one of the things that a lot of the housing advocates are looking at is to make sure that there's some kind of a policy in all of the transit agencies when they sell land, is to say it needs to have a component of affordable housing. And the other thing that I will say, and I work as a housing advocate with Midpen Housing now, the other thing that I will say is, much as we talk about affordable housing and housing subsidies, the other thing that, especially in cities like Fremont, whether you talk about single-family housing or multi-family housing, I mean, it's 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom and 2,400 square foot units. And so if you bring that down to 600 square feet, I mean, you've got affordability by design. I mean, not that I'm saying that's the only thing we need to do, but that's another component that we need to be looking at as well.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to move to the next.
Great job, Pam.